Hi golfers, Nick here from GOLFTEC Singapore. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week in golf tips, we're going to continue the theme talking about the 3 key fundamentals of playing good golf. If you've not seen my previous video, we talked about the first one, which is contact or the low point of the swing. If you've not seen that, make sure you check it out. So we're going to talk about power, the second key fundamental of playing good golf. So when you look at the best players in the world, they hit the ball a long way. The tour players on the PGA Tour averaging over 300 yards, club head speed over about 110, 115 miles an hour with a driver, around 90 miles an hour with a 7-iron. We're going to take a look at what they do in their swings. We're going to use the 3D motion to give you guys a little bit of an idea of how they swing the golf club and how they create that power. So before we take a look at how we create power and how we create speed in the golf swing to create those sort of distances that these players are hitting, first of all, I just want to note that it's very important that while we're creating power, we don't want to sacrifice that fundamental number one. So fundamental number one is the contact or the low point of the swing. If we're hitting an iron, we're trying to create that divot in front of the golf ball. So we still need to make good contact, but also do it with some degree of power as well. Very important. We've got a 7-iron here. These tour players are probably hitting these around 170 yards. So they still need to make good contact, but at the same time create power. So when we're looking at the golf swing today, we're going to take a look at some 3D motion. We're going to take a look at some tour players as well. We're going to look at how they create power, but also at the same time still making good contact. So on the screen here I've got the hip turn and shoulder turn. We're going to take a look at how the best players move their shoulders and their hips in their swings and how they do that. So first of all, when you look at the best players, as they swing to the top of the backswing, they're going to have around about 45 degree of hip turn and about 90 degree of shoulder turn. So as I make a backswing here, you can see how I'm getting around 50 degrees of hip turn and about 90 degrees of shoulder turn. The more you can turn, the more that's going to help you create power in the swing. It also does another thing as well. It helps you create what we call depth in the swing. So when you take a look at the left-hand picture there, you can see from down the line, you've got these 2 strings here. We talked about this a lot in the videos. So this is called the grid. So you've got hand path and club path. As you swing, the hands and the club move inwards around the body, and that moves the club behind me. So just exaggerating this a little bit, but if you look at where the club head is, it's quite a long way behind me. And now the more behind me the club is, the more potential that has of creating speed and power in the swing. Okay? If I was to swing this club head out in front of me, you can see how my turns are less, and that swing will come more across the ball. Now the best players turn 45 average with the hips, 90 degree average with the shoulders, and they're sort of creating depth in the swing to help create power. And that's one of the ways these players create power, is swinging behind them in an arc, but at the same time they're turning the body. Now when we look at the body movements, one of the key things is, we're going to study this in a minute, is how the knees move. One other key is the feet as well. So if you look at the face-on view there, you can see both my feet sort of flared out, the left one potentially a little bit more than the right. Now as I swing, you'll see this from the left-hand picture here, from down the line, as I swing, the knee flex starts to change quite early on. By the time we get to the top, there's going to be quite a big gap between my knees. You look at the best players, to help turn your hips and on the correct angle, there has to be a knee flex change. So let's hit a shot, then we're going to study the swing, look at the tour players, take a look at some numbers as well. Okay, so you can see there on the screen, pretty straight golf shot. I've got a 7-iron here, sort of carried about 180. So when you look at the top players, they're hitting these 7-irons such a long way these days, and also with good contact. You saw there, made pretty good contact. So taking a look at some data quickly. So club head speed around 96, ball speed 129. You can see the strike out the middle. The swing path was only 2.5 degrees from into out and about 4 degrees down. So it's a pretty good golf shot. Let's sit down now, take a look at the video and take a look at these 3D numbers. So you see me hit a shot there on the quad, just to give you guys a bit of an idea. So 96 miles an hour club head speed, hit it pretty good, 129 ball speed, carried 181 with a 7-iron. So when you look at the best players, they're sort of swinging the golf club with 7-iron over 90 miles an hour. So that's why they hit the ball so far. Now the key was that I made good contact, and I think that's really important. Just talking about last week, making sure that low point in front of the ball. So we're going to take a look at the video, take a look at some numbers, maybe look at why maybe the contact was good, but also there was power in the swing as well. So first of all, let's take the swing up to the top of the backswing. So I've got a line here on the hip from face on. I've got the swing cone from down the line and the head in the box, just to give you guys a bit of an idea. So on the backswing there, hip turn and shoulder turn, bang on sort of what the tour averages are. You see how they've gone green. Now the key thing is, if you look at the face on view, you'll see how I've created some daylight between this line and my hip there. Now we look at a lot of amateur golfers, they sort of sway through this line. We talked a little bit about this last week and other videos as well. Now it's very important you sort of stay inside that line. So I hit that 96 miles an hour with no movement away from the target. I think that's really a key point there. So we're going to move the swing into the downswing now. So first of all, if you look at, say from face on, you can see how I've moved my weight, continued to move it onto that front foot. So as I went back, I didn't shift to the right, but I stayed in position. I've sort of pivoted on my left side and started to move that weight to the left. You can see my knees outside my foot there. Now, as I get down to sort of left arm parallel position, what you'll see from down the line is sort of the shaft inside this cone. This cone I've got from down the line is basically the shaft plane and the sort of the top of the elbow plane. So as I swing back down, you can see how that shaft's inside that cone. When we look at creating power, we're looking at creating depth in the swing. We talked about this a second ago when I was on the mat there, talking about how the club behind you more, swinging round behind you is going to create more power. I see a lot of amateur golfers with the shaft out here at this point, almost going through the neck, and that's quite what we call steep, but also it's going to start to create a par from outside, and you're going to lose power from that as well. So when you look at the best players, they may not swing back up and down the cone on the way back, but on the way down they find that club inside the cone. And a good position to look at would be, so when the club's parallel to the ground here, you'll see how the club head here is basically in line with the hands. You can see my head's in the box, you can see my hips have started to turn here. You'll see from the face on view, sort of the butt of the club here over my leg, almost on the golf ball. And when you look at the best player, you see these time and time again. So key thing is, to create power, you have to have the rotation. We talked about the shoulder turn and the hip turn. If we just talk about how the knee flex moves, I talked about that briefly. If I just put a line here on my knees, you can see as I swing back, you'll see how the knee flex starts to change right from the beginning. So the club hasn't even gone probably halfway back at this point. You can see the difference. You look at this left hand picture in the knees. So the knee flex is changing. That's helping me turn my hips. Feet are flared, hands are moving inwards, behind on the arc. So now we're going to take a look at some tour examples. I've got Tony Finau and Garcia here. So I brought Tony Finau up because he's got quite a short swing. A lot of players think where maybe he gets the power from. So first of all, you can see the knee flex changing here. Let's take Garcia at the top as well. See the knee flex changing. Notice how both of them have got their hands sort of on the top of their elbow plane line, so they haven't lifted up above. Tony Finau swings a bit shorter. That's probably why it appears that his arm here is sort of below his shoulders. Now the key thing is, as they start down, you'll see how this club falls into this cone. Now Garcia, he probably has one of the flattest shaft angles on the way down out of anyone, so he creates a credible amount of lag in his swing. But you can see how that club's sort of trailing behind him a lot more. His club's actually a bit more on the inside. You see Tony Finau's club here, roughly where, I can't quite get the perfect frame here, but his club head just inside the hands, it would be at parallel, whereas Garcia would be inside the hands. And again, you can see the rotation of the body on the way down. So there's a couple of good examples from down the line. Let's just look at a couple more. So next two golfers we've got here are Rory McIlroy, Dustin Johnson. Just put the same lines in, so shaft plane, elbow plane, and on the knees. So again, you see the knee flex changing. What's interesting about these two golfers, I've actually got McIlroy here with a driver, Dustin Johnson with an iron, but just notice how their hands are slightly above the sort of elbow plane on the backswing. However, on the way down, they find that in between that cone. They manage to get that shaft back inside that cone like all the best players do. If you take the club to roughly shaft parallel, you can see club head just inside the hands with McIlroy. You may be a quarter of a frame out here, and Dustin Johnson's got the club in line with the hands. You'll see the best players at this point with the club in line with the hands all just inside. So that's them swinging the club on this arc behind them. Let's just take a look at two more examples. Okay, so a couple more examples here. I've got Charlie Hull, Lexi Thompson, two of the longest hitters on the ladies tour. Now, interesting, Charlie Hull doesn't change the knee flex as much as a lot of players here, so maybe she hasn't quite got the hip turn. You can see Lexi's got a lot more, and her swing's a little bit longer. Now, Charlie Hull's hands are sort of inside the cone, Lexi's above the cone. However, as they start down, you see how, again, they find this in the middle of this cone. And when you look at a lot of the best players in the world, they're going to find the club inside this cone on the way down. Now, I can't quite get the perfect frame here for Charlie Hull, but what you'll see is you can see Lexi Thompson has the club head just inside her hands at this point. Again, excessive amount of rotation here from Charlie Hull on the left. And so you see a lot of the best players here that they might not take the club back inside that cone, but on the way down they find it. And that's the club swinging behind them on the arc. That's one of the ways they create power, and obviously the rotation of the body. Let's switch it around now and take a look at the face-on view. I switched the viewpoint round. We can take a look at the face-on view. We saw my swing. I've put the line on the trail hip. Now, interesting one, I've got Stenson here, first one on the left. As he swings back, he starts to break that line, and you'll see a lot of players see that move and think that Stenson's sort of moving off the golf ball, if you like. However, as he gets to the top, you'll see how he's created quite a fair bit of daylight between that line and his trail hip there. Similar from Mickelson, actually, in a way. You see the first sort of move, he just sort of breaks that line. However, as he gets to the top, he sort of created that daylight again, and you'll see this time and time again with the best players. You looked at my swing as well. They're not sort of swaying off the golf ball. They're sort of staying more pivoted slightly on their left. It's certainly not shifting deliberately to the right hand side. I think that's where a lot of amateur golfers go wrong. They try and sort of move onto their trail side too much. So let's have a look as we swing down. You'll sort of see how both these players again keep moving forward of that line. So by the time they move through impact, you can see both those players have moved a lot further forward than where they're starting. When you look at the best players, that's what they do. They move their weight forward towards the target, not away. Let's just look at a couple more. Okay, I've just pulled up two more golfers here. So we've got McIlroy, Dustin Johnson. We looked at these from down the line, obviously. Now, in the backswing, you'll see similar theme here. So both these players here moving inside of that line. We've got McIlroy with a, looks like a fairway wood, Dustin Johnson with an iron. And now a similar theme as we start down. Both these players sort of moving their weight through into the finish. You can see how much their hips have moved forward from where they started. I see a lot of amateur golfers, in some cases, they actually move back from where they started, and that's one of the biggest issues. It affects power, but more importantly, affects the contact and the low point of the swing. So just to recap there, we took a look at some motion measurement numbers. We took a look at my swing, what I do using those motion measurement numbers. Key things there were the hip turn 45, shoulders 90 degrees. To do that, I said turn the feet, change the knee flex. That's going to help you turn your hips. When you look at the best players, they all change their knee flex in the backswing. It helps them turn their hips, really key. They're not restricting their hip turn and turning against it with their shoulders. Also from down the line, we took a look at sort of the swing plane. Now the best golfers get that club inside that cone at some point on the downswing. Some players will take it out. A good example would be someone like Jim Furyk. He takes the club outside but manages to find inside that cone on the way down. So the best players are swinging the club in behind them. They're creating depth in the swing. That depth with the club behind them is creating speed and power on an arc. They're not swinging it out in front of them. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions. They're not creating sort of width out in front of them. They're swinging the club in behind them. Also from face on, I thought that was quite a key one to look at there. We looked at all those players, they all turned inside that line. Okay, and a lot of amateur golfers, one of the biggest mistakes I see is that sort of shift off the golf ball, and that has a massive effect on sort of the low point of the swing. I think the key one there was maybe looking at someone like Stenson, because you see that a lot. Players see that first move, that first initial move where the player moves slightly off the ball. However, by the time he gets to the top, he's back on his left side with his hips and driving forward. So really key points there, golfers, to create power, knee flex changing to turn the body, also swing the club on the arc behind you. That's going to help you create more speed in the golf swing. So thanks for watching, golfers. Any questions, post them in the box below. If you don't already, please follow me at my other social media platforms, and we'll see you again next week for another video on golf tips.